This is KUGAN CASSIUS for IFL TV in association with Macklin's Gym Marbella. Today I'm taking the role of Frank Warren, sitting in his office.
Good morning.
It's a nice office.
Not bad.
Do you need all this stuff, Frank?
What? Well, I need a desk to sit.
No, all this. Like, do you need all this stuff, or is it just for show?
No, it's just what it is, isn't it? A pad for writing on, books for keeping notes.
Sports law.
Sports law is very important.
Is that very important in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I recommend anybody who's involved in boxing get a sports law book.
Definitely. First thing I want to talk to you about is obviously there was a tweet from Andy Lee a couple of days ago to say that the fight with Billy Joe Saunders would take place in Ireland on the 19th of September. Haven't had any official confirmation from yourself. So where does that stand at the moment?
Well, the date is the date. I'm sure the fight will take place on that date, and it will take place in Ireland. But I've got to meet with Bill, which would be tomorrow, and we've got to iron out a couple of points. And then obviously, if we get that done, we'll have a press conference, hopefully this week.
So obviously there was talk of the fight being either Ireland or London. Is it a bit of a kick in the teeth to you that it's not here in London?
It is and it isn't. It started to become very expensive to do the fight at the soccer ground, which we wanted to do in England, and the proposal that they put up in Ireland makes, for some reason, makes more sense. So I haven't got a problem. I think Billy Joe said to me he doesn't care where he fights as long as he gets his world title shot. That's all he's focused on. That's all he's concerned with, and obviously that's what's going to happen.
Originally, when I last spoke to you, the fight was a proposed date for the fight would have been the 5th of September.
Yeah.
So what changed there then?
Well, the 5th of September was because there isn't any there isn't any Premiership football on that date. England are playing San Marino or whatever it is on that date. So it made a lot of sense to do it. It meant that we had access to a soccer ground, which was going to be West Ham, because obviously you got the international breaks, and it would give time for to set the pitch out and for it to recover. But as I say, it's turned out financially better to go to Ireland.
So hopefully, like I said, 19th is the day.
Yeah.
Ireland and
subject to Bill. As I said, I've not had a chance to sit down properly when we spoke about it, but tomorrow's his lawyer's away, and the lawyer's back tomorrow, so we sit down and get it over the line.
We know that Billy Joe Saunders will fight on the 24th of July in what you and him term as a warm-up fight.
Yeah.
But he's obviously been inactive for several months now, hasn't he, since
Well,
Eubank?
because all that messing around with trying to make the Eubank fight, which fell away, and it caused us all a lot of heartache and a lot of problems. It didn't happen, which is very unfortunate. But anyway, wasn't meant to be, so we move on, and he does need to get a bit of rust out of his system, so he'll fight on the 24th of July at Wembley, and just a ticking over fight to get yourself prepared and ready for the fight in September.
In Billy Joe Saunders' words, he said he would just be fighting a bum. That's what Billy Joe Saunders said.
Well, he won't be fighting a bum. He'll be fighting somebody at the boxing ball game. But I'm not looking to upset the opportunity of a world title fight, and I'll be a liar if I said any different. He just wants to get some, a couple of rounds under his belt, or some rounds under his belt.
I think that's Billy Joe's just normal terminology anyway. But it's an intriguing fight because, like I said, this Billy Joe Saunders he's had to step aside from a couple of world title fights, and he's finally going to get his shot. And in his opinion, hopefully, it's the wait has been worth it.
Yeah, of course it has. I mean, it's always going to get his shot, provided he didn't get beat. He had the #1 spot, and he stepped aside to allow Andy to challenge for the title and to make another defence of the title against Quillen. And now it's his time. It's his turn, and that's where we are. And for him, I think it's going to be Bill's time. I mean, I really do fancy Bill in this fight. I think it's obviously a very tough fight, but as they use the old cliche, styles make fights, and I think Bill's got. I think he's a good quality boxer. I think he's got a great chin, and you need a great chin against Andy Lee. And I just fancy him for this fight. I think wherever the fight takes place, whether it be in Ireland, London, on the moon, I fancy my man to win it.
There was a fight over the weekend on Boxnation for the vacant IBF title between David Lemieux and Hassan N'Dam, which David Lemieux impressed very well. He's a sort of an up and coming, but he's been on the scene for a little while, but people are starting to take notice of how good Lemieux is. But this had some sort of reference to Billy Joe, because obviously he was made mandatory for that title before Lemieux fought. And,
That's correct.
And but that obviously Billy Joe was going the WBO route, and that would have affected him if he'd sort of stepped into that IBF route.
Again, correct. So, I mean, that was the route that he chose. We discussed and he chose. It's funny. You look at the fight; he'd be champion now, wouldn't he? There's no doubt about that. I fancy him. I fancied him against him anyway, against Nadal, and Lemieux. He'd done very well, but I'd be interested to see what happened with him if a fight went longer, stamina wise.
Yeah.
I just got the feeling. That he put a lot into it, but I've got the feeling he was like slowing down a little bit. So it's be interesting to find out in the future.
Obviously, your next show will be on the 11th of July against Terry Flanagan, obviously fighting for the vacant lightweight title against Jose Zabida.
Yeah.
There was a story recently, I think it was reported by Boxnation, that Derek Chisora would be on the bill against Ustinov.
We never announced that. That was announced by somebody in Russia. Ustinov's people wanted to fight Derek, but that's not going to happen. Derek will fight on the card, though.
Okay.
He will fight on the card.
What kind of opponent?
I don't know yet. We're looking at somebody. He is looking, and he wants somebody in the top 10, and that's what we're trying to put together at the moment.
With Derek Chisora, obviously fought at the very highest level against the best heavyweights from, internationally, globally, domestically, whatever. Where is Derek Chisora in his state of mind about at what level he wants to compete
Well,
at?
he's changed trainers. He's got a new trainer. As always, he wants to fight at the top level. He's asked for somebody to fight somebody in the top 10. Whether he is, we'll find out when he fights, because he's got a lot to do to establish himself back in that division. And it won't be easy. It's, he got beat last time by Tyson Fury. It was a very, very tough fight for him, and he's got to get back from that. So it's he's mentally, Derek's always up for it. Just got to make sure that not just mentally, but physically, he can get in there and do it and show that he's still got it in him to do it. And we won't know about that until he faces somebody of with a decent record and a guy who comes to fight.
Interesting to see Terry Flanagan at Ricky Hatton's gym the other day. Ricky Hatton giving him obviously some words of advice, which would make Terry Flanagan hopefully on the 11th of July the first person from Manchester to win a world title since Ricky Hatton. So
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Which is pretty. It was 10 years ago last week, wasn't it? I think. So it's great for Ricky to do that, to pass on his knowledge and experience to Terry. Terry's got a tough fight. There's no doubt about that. But can't do no more than get it on home soil. He's got it on home soil. He's got it all to do. But you know what? He's a good boxer. He's got a good boxing brain. This guy's never made the weight yet. This is obviously championship weight. He's never fought a championship weight. So it's going to be interesting to see where whether he can. I'm sure he can do it, but how that affects him. And Terry's a smart boxer, and he's got. What more can you have? You're doing it in front of your fans. That should get a bit more out of him, and hopefully he can come away with a prize.
That bill on the 24th, obviously headlined by Frank Buglioni's world title shot against Fedor Chudinov. Seen a little bit of criticism about whether or not Frank Buglioni, who hasn't fought for a British title yet, should be fighting someone like Chudinov for a world title. How would you counter that, Frank?
Well, I would say that prior to Chudinov fighting Sturm, wasn't it, in Germany, people would have said, what's he done to deserve fighting Sturm? He's only had 13 fights and did what he did. He's got his opportunity. We've made it happen for him. We'll see whether he deserves it or not on the 24th. I think he's got a good chance of becoming champion. Again, he's got his home court. He's got everything going for him in this fight. He's fighting a champion who's had 13 fights, which I'd much rather be fighting somebody who's only had 13 fights than somebody who's really had more and more experience. So he's got a great chance of coming away with this. We will see. And if he wins it, then he deserves it.
I think I've spoken to you about this before, but where do you draw the line of a fighter that sort of deserves the opportunity but probably hasn't had the experience to compete at world level, and how do you assess, whether they're ready for that or not?
It depends who they're fighting, and Chudinov, as I said, he's had 13 fights. So prior to Chudinov fighting Sturm, Would I have made that fight for Frank Buglioni? Well, I would have. You know, if that had been a final eliminator for a title or for the European title, you'd have grabbed it with both hands. I'm not saying it's an easy fight, it's a tough fight, but you'd have grabbed it. So the fact it's got a world title tag on it, I think is in some ways irrelevant as to the experience that both of them have at that, you know, at that level. So, you know, for me, I don't think that Frank Buglioni, no one can say he doesn't deserve to be in the ring with Shirdanov. You know, you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. If I'd have found an easy job for him, everybody complains and says, you know, you've got to, well, how comes he's fighting this guy? Why isn't he fighting someone a bit tougher? Well, he stepped up the plate and he is fighting somebody who's tough. And, you know, if he wins, and he's got a good chance of winning, then, you know, the gamble paid off. Remember, he's gambling as well. You know, he's the one who wants to fight as well as, you know, we wanted to make it. And again, there's all different levels. There's different levels of what, you know, you look at world champions. You know, Shirdanov might go on and become a great fighter. But at the moment, he's not a great fighter. At the moment, he's a guy that beat a decent fighter, done it in his own backyard, upset the odds in a fight that probably going into he was a massive underdog. So let's hope the underdog in everybody's eyes wins again.
Absolutely. What's your take on the belt situation? It's very confusing, obviously, to some boxing fans who don't really understand about the regular situation, the super champion and things like that, whether people who have the regular title with the WBA are regarded as real world champions. I think Scott Quigg's had this since he won it, and Jamie McDonnell as well. But obviously Frank's fighting for the belt
the belt
that Carl Froch had. Yeah. But what is your take on the whole belt situation?
I'm as confused as they are. I'll be honest with you. You know, they got, 3 different titles. It's hard work, and there's no doubt about that. But it's all about, I suppose, about opportunities for fighters. You know, I don't make the rules with the WBA. You know, they are what they are. And as a manager of fighter and as promoter of the fighters, I am. You know, I've got to do what's best for my man. And if I get an opportunity to my fighter, I'll grab it with both hands. Whatever it is, if it suits, if it gets me, it gets him to point. You know, E to get to D to get to C and up to A. I'll do whatever it takes and try and take advantage of that situation. But I understand the fans' frustration. I really do.
There's been a lot of instances over the last few months where fighters have failed to make weight, and also fights have been made at various catch weights. First of all, with the catch weight situation, is that good for the sport or not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the catch weight, it depends. I mean, if somebody is you know, say somebody's fighting, say they're a super middleweight and they're fighting a middleweight, and it's 2 guys agree, you know, a midweight to make the fight because it doesn't give advantage to somebody, I understand that. And fights do happen like that. If you're referring to the fight, Andre Ward fight, which I assume you're referring to with Paul Smith last week, that was made 2 pounds overweight, I assume because Andre's been out of the ring for 18 months or so?
Roughly, yeah.
Paul Smith to come in that weight is ridiculous. It was £9 over the day before, or was it £9? I mean, so what I heard.
I think it was £4.
But he went up £4 over on the day,
yeah.
So it's a lot of weight. So first question is, what's Joe Gallagher doing, allowing that to happen? It doesn't. It's not fair on a promoter, and it's not fair on the other fighter when you do that. And I know he got fined, and I know Andre Ward made $2 million from the fight, so he decided afterwards not to take the 60 grand off him. So I understand, but it's crazy. It's a nonsense, and you know the reason you have a contract is, and the contract states these things. You know what weight the fight's at, what are the full fixture situations if you don't make the weight, and I find, you know, it's increasing more and more with fighters, and I really don't think that's acceptable, because you're left in a situation on the day before a fight, somebody comes in overweight, are you going to put the fight on or not? It's like a blackmail situation, really. You know, so I'm not going to fight, you know, so what? And that can be, you know, I mean, the difference between Paul Smith and Andre Ward is there's a vast gulf there. But if that's, you know, a sort of close fight where the guy two guys are pretty close to each other and the weight makes all the difference and somebody does that, then that's wrong. That's wrong for the other fighter. I noticed a few fights out in the States where they're not coming, but I think that's because PBC are not too worried about the governing bodies. They don't announce the belts and so forth, so I don't think they really care about that, or it seems like they don't care about the governing bodies' belts. That's why some of the fights are coming overweight.
Would you be a fan of day weigh-ins, on the day weigh-ins?
Well, the reason the weigh-ins come in the day before was a reaction to fight injuries and research that boxers concern over rehydration, because obviously some guys struggle to make the weight, and it felt that it gives the body, especially the brain as well, gives it 24 hours, the body's 24 hours to rehydrate, so that you're not going to hopefully it doesn't have an adverse effect on the boxer. And there's been other research now saying, well, that's actually not the case. Maybe they should be back on the day of the fights. Then you look at a situation, say like you look at the Smith situation, how would he have got that weight off in a day? What would have been like on a night? So there's a lot, it's a very complex, you've got to give a very complex answer to a complex question. And I think that, that's down to neurologists to give their opinion on that. And I think that something should be done about it. And I think they should have another look at it. All the governing bodies should look at it again. As I say, it's brought in for purely for safety measures, which is very important. But maybe people are taking advantage of that now.
We know with the IBF, obviously, they have rules regarding the check weight the day after, that you can only sort of put on a certain amount of pounds. But should that be across all governing bodies, Frank? Do you think there should be a limit of how much weight you can put on after a weigh? I
agree with that. I do agree with that, and I think that's how it should be. Again, but the other side of it is, it's all very well saying how much weight you put on. Let's say somebody does put on a stone, 14 pounds. That's a lot of weight. What is it? What you're actually putting on? You're only putting lots of fluid and stuff in your body, and sometimes, weight's heavy. It can slow you down. For me, any sensible fighter fights stays at his best weight, whatever he needs to. If he can't make the weight, he should move up a division. It's really simple as that. If he doesn't make the weight, then if he can't make the weight, then the bottom line is then, as I say, move up a division. It's very dangerous to mess around with weights. We've seen the sauna situations and things with fighters. That again is very dangerous. To go in there and dehydrate like some guys do to make weight is wrong, and it is wrong. And I made my point about that regard, especially your promoter sitting in the sauna with you. It leaves a lot to be desired. But the fact of the matter is that it's a very, very dangerous scenario. And there are a lot of people who probably, I've been around, and I keep boring people when I say I've been around for a long time. I've seen what happens when people have suffered from dehydration. I've seen fatalities in the British ring, and things that shouldn't have happened, and seen the effects it has on the families, and and the repercussions to the sport and so forth. And more importantly, the repercussions to the boxer. It needs to be, that's what trainers should be. They're the guys there, day in, day out with a trainer. With the fighter, they're the ones who know whether they can make the weight or not. They're the ones who should be telling, informing the manager and all concerned if there is a problem. And sometimes it is tough to make the weight. And I've seen guys have to eke it out. And you look at it and you think, hang on a minute, is he going to be all right or not? But when people have got to lose huge amounts of weight, the week of a fight or a couple of days, and there's only certain ways they can do it, then it's going to wind up one way. You're going to be weak from losing the weight. You can put as much down as you want after, but you're not going to feel strong. All that debilitating process to get the weight out, to get down to the weight, and then thinking the next day you can just drink gallons of water and stuff a bit of food down it, is not going to make you a better fighter. At certain levels. So I think it's madness.
Okay. Going back to obviously we were talking about the belt situation. Do you think in 2 or 3 years to come, belts are going to become more and more irrelevant to boxing?
No. I think any fighter, you speak to a fighter, I want to fight for the British, I want to win the Lonsdale belt, I want the world title, I want a belt. Are you going to get to where, you might as well just have 10-round fights or 12-round fights. What happens to what's the weight category they're going to fight at? And if you're getting rid of, I'm not saying you should have 4 governing bodies. I think there's 4 governing bodies is too much. I really do believe that. That you need a couple at least, so that you've got a choice. We've seen fighters many years ago getting frozen out of opportunities to fight for world titles. But I think you need a couple, so there is an alternative. And at the end of the day, good fights happen. The champion, the BO champion will fight the WBC or the WBA champion. That will happen because the business will call for it. But to get rid of the belts, I think I don't agree with that at all. Boxing has been about the world champion strapping a belt around his waist. It's been about the British champion strapping the belt around his waist, the European. That's what that at the end of it, that's what the fight's all about. And it's a process, from Britain, win the British title in some cases, win the Commonwealth title, win the European, then go and fight for the world title. And that happens with a lot of boxers, and there's a lot of pride in doing that. And I think to just take that away for whatever reason is going to be wrong. I really don't. I don't agree with it, and I actually don't think that's what's going to happen either.
So Frank, there has been circumstances over the years where the 2 fighters involved have been obviously bigger than what's online, whether that's 1 belt, 2 belt, whatever unification. You'd agree with that?
Yeah, I do. Mayweather Pacquiao is a prime example. There's been some of those big fights over the years, but you do need a structure. If every promoter's got some fighters signed, how are you going to determine who's the champion? How are you ever going to get the fighters to fight each other? And that only happens when you have structure, and you have to have governing bodies, not just for belts, but for medicals, to administrate the rules, to appoint the officials. It's not just about the belt. It's actually having that governing body, ensuring and administrating that the sport's run correctly, and more importantly, that somebody doesn't just take the sport over completely. And I just feel that, there is a process of fighters, certainly in this country, maybe fighting for the British title, Commonwealth, European, and then going on to fight the world title. And, winning a belt from various different organisations is quite important to them and important to the fans. And it's part of the history of the sport. You go back and think of the old fighters from, yesteryear, like the Henry Coopers, the Frank Brunos, the Ricky Hattons, Kawasakis, all of them. They've all set all in their way, set benchmarks in their careers. Henry Cooper won 3 Lonsdale belts. Joe Kawasaki defended his the belt 20 times, or whatever it was. That is all quite important to the history of the sport. To take all that away, what do you replace it with? Let's use an example, is one of my guys going to fight one of the Matchroom guys unless the Boxing Board of Control, or unless one gets in a mandatory position to fight, one of us has a champion, the other guy gets in a mandatory position, and it's ordered. They'll never happen. Will never.
Why won't it happen?
Because that's the nature of the beast. Listen, I've put fighters there. You think I'm going to pick up the phone and say to Matchroom, you want to put him in A in with B? The answer 9 times out of 10, or 99 times out of 100 will be no. They won't do it. It won't happen. What, am I going to put my fighter who's on Sky on Boxnation? No, we're not going to do that. So you have to have some structure. You have to have a situation where fighters are not being frozen out, where there is a champion, and whether he's a good champion or a bad champion, the fact is, at the end of the day, the cream rises to the top. The best fighters will get there, and the best fighter will become champion. Along the way, you'll find some guys who are not so good, but that happens in all sports. That happens in football. Eventually, you get found out, but to not have the championships, to not have, and we talked about earlier about dehydration and weigh-ins, to not have all those things under a structure, under with a governing body that's considered to be respected, and to administrate the regulations, would be crazy. It turned into total anarchy, and I don't believe that that's good for the sport. And I certainly, you wouldn't want the Matchroom belt, or the Warren belt, or the Queensbury belt, or the Golden Boy belt. You just don't. I don't think that's good for the game, in my opinion. Other people got their views on it, but you have to have some structure. You've got to make the fights happen, and by by there being a governing body, by there being champions rated, even though there's 4 world governing bodies, which you mentioned earlier, at least 2 too many. But at the end of the day, we do get them fighting each other. We do make the fights happen when we can make them happen. And I think that, you know, it's worked for years. But this situation with guys, you know, and if you haven't got championship and you haven't got championship weight, what's going to happen regarding the weights? You know, you put in the contract, oh, you're going to weigh, you're going to come in at 12 stone for the fight. They don't come in, well, so what? It's only on the line. I'll pay a bit extra. But if you've got the chance to become world champion, it's even more, and get that belt, it's even more in your interest that you all come in on the weight. Because at the end of the day, you're going to walk away with a championship. If you can't agree terms with the next guy down, you'll go to purse bids and you'll get 80% or 75% of that purse bid. So it's in your interest to be the champion. It's your interest to make the weight. It's your interest to make this move forward rather than just disregard it and say, you know, who cares? I really don't think it'll work.
Well, Frank, we've seen with this new PBC thing and Al Heyman that obviously they've pitted a lot of their fighters together who are under Al Heyman's sort of guidance or whatever his advisorship or anything. But here, obviously, the casual boxing fan or a lot of boxing fans, what you just mentioned there about you ringing up someone from another promotional stable and just saying, we've got a middleweight here, blah blah blah, let's stick him in your one. Yeah, that sounds a good fight, let's get the fight on, blah blah blah. Why doesn't that happen?
Well, it does happen with Al Heyman either. I mean, Al Heyman has fighters under, as you quite rightly say, under contract, and he's doing brilliantly what he's doing in getting exposure in the States on all those different broadcasting platforms, and that's great for the game to get that type of exposure. What happens here is if it's a British level, the Boxing Board of Control will make it happen. And we've had fights with Matchroom ourselves and other promoters where they make fights happen. But to voluntarily do them is a very, very difficult situation. You know, it just not. I mean, for example, you know, Derek Chisora and Anthony Joshua. Do you think we could pick the phone up and make that fight? Do you think if I offered more money than they're paying Anthony Joshua, they're going to let him fight on my show?
I don't know.
Well, you know the answer to that. You do know it's just not going to happen, and it's all we're all over 21, and we know the reasons why. But that's a fact of life. You can't. It's not about taking the. It's not about making that. Taking away titles isn't going to make people cooperate with each other. It's going to be quite the reverse. Because, as you say, you know, in Al Heyman's case, he's got a lot of fighters that he's signed up over the last couple of years, and he's got quite a big stable, and they're all fighting each other. But now and then, some of those champions have to fight other fighters, and we've seen fighters recently. Some of his fighters get beaten in title fights because the board, the various governing body ordered the fight to take place. So, is that a bad thing or a good thing? I think it's a good thing that somebody outside manages to get an opportunity to fight for a title. A boxer who is the world champion, who's tied to a promoter. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. And a mandatory means there's no options. It means that, you know, whoever wins, if it's the challenger wins, he goes off and he does his own. You know, he's got a chance to do his own thing.
So you pick your fighters against each other. You know, if you did
I always do.
You've always done it. I mean, you did it not that long ago with obviously 2 unbeaten fighters in Catchweights and Stalker, and you're not afraid to do it.
And it's not the end of a boxer's career, by the way.
Yeah.
In doing that, that's not the end of a boxer's career. A guy gets beat, so he gets beat. You know, George Groves. We made George Groves and DeGale all those years ago. Not all those years. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. It weren't the end of either of them. You know, one's about to fight for one's fought for a world. What's his name? George has fought.
James has won.
George
is about to.
George has had a couple of fights for world titles and about to have another chance. So it's not the end of the world. You know, getting beat is not the end of the world. You know, it's how what happens, how the defeat is. You know, how bad a defeat it is. You know, there are close fights. There are debatable decisions. It's not the end of the world. You know, if you're good fighters, you look at all the great fighters. Most of them, I would say 99.9% of them, have got a loss on their record.
Not everyone's a Floyd Mayweather.
No, or a Joe Calzaghe. You know, it's quite an interesting debate. And I'm sure people have all got their views on it, but you know, you have to, as much as boxing is considered to be the bastard sport in some ways, you have to have some governance there. You have to have some structure to, you know, make sure things happen.
We're halfway through the year now. Would you say that the first part of 2015 has been, not just for your promotional company, but boxing in general, has been flat?
Flat?
Yeah.
No, I think it's been. I think that, you know, we've had champions. There's been some good fights. My disappointment is we didn't get the rematch on with Saunders and Eubanks, and it's very disappointing considering the amount of time we put into it, but it weren't to be. So that was a bit of a disappointment. But we've got some fighters in good position. There's quite a few British fighters that are about to again challenge for a world title, and it seems that we're in a little bit of a renaissance as far as world champions is concerned, and interim champions. There's a lot going on in the sport, which we're as a British boxing is holding its own at the moment, which I think is really good news.
But every year, obviously, we have what we regarded as standard boxing shows, but the boxing fan craves the marquee standout fight, the Saunders Eubank, the Froch Groves, those type of events. Obviously, I was making reference to the fact that in the first part of the 6 months we haven't seen that. Obviously, Mayweather Pacquiao wasn't anything to do with what's going on here, but the next 6 months it can only happen then, surely.
Well, you think you've got a great one in Andy Lee and Billy Joe Saunders. That is a cracking fight. That is a proper quality fight. So that's happening. I mean, that's not being ducked or anything. That fight is happening. Adam Booth and I are working on that, and that fight is going to happen in September. So that's brilliant news. Tyson Fury will get his shot at the world title. He'll be fighting Klitschko. That fight will happen. Whoever promotes it, it's going to happen. So that's, again, is great news for British boxing. There are many out there. I mean, Matchroom got a few guys that are, and hopefully a few matches they're putting together. Again, it's great for the game. There are a lot of things happening, but there are also a few things happening this year which I'm quite surprised at. But regarding the sport, like with all these pay-per-views that are all suddenly going to, every 8 weeks or whatever it's going to be, which I don't know where that's going to go and how that's going to lead the sport. But all these things are happening, and I think it's quite exciting times for British boxing. And the marquee fights will happen. They always come through. They always come through. In its way, Frank Buglioni and Shulidov is a cracking fight. It's going to be a good fight. I think on paper that's a good fight.
But going back to Klitschko Fury, obviously that potentially could be that marquee fight we're looking for this year. But again, we've spoken about this numerous times, and it's unclear, who will promote this.
It is unclear.
What channel it'll be on. It's
unclear because nothing's been agreed.
Which must be very frustrating for you.
It's very frustrating for everybody. It's frustrating, more importantly, for Tyson Fury. But at the end of the day, the fight will happen because the governing body will make the fight happen. And if there wasn't a governing body, Klitschko wouldn't be fighting him. And that is the point of what I was trying to make earlier. When you're talking about governing bodies forcing the issue, that the WBO and the WBA now have actually forced the issue and said to Klitschko, you have to fight Tyson Fury. You can't agree terms, you're going to put purse bids. One thing's for sure, you're going to fight him, and if you don't fight him, you're going to be stripped. So there is a prime example of two parties who can't agree terms at the moment, trying to negotiate and agree. But you know what? In the end, it gets taken out of their hands, and the governing body will say, it's on. Get on with it.
Tyson Fury tweeted the other day, I'm assuming this is very incorrect, but he tweeted and said that he's heard that the fight could take place in Japan. Can you make any comments?
I don't know about that.
In Tokyo, in Japan. That was from Tyson Fury's Twitter, but make of what you want of Tyson Fury's Twitter.
I've got no idea. He may know something. I don't know. Who knows?
Who knows? But like I said, hopefully that fight does happen this year. And
it's a great. It's on paper, it's a great fight, isn't it? It's something we want. We want to see, and I think he's got a great chance of winning it.
I think the build up to it will be worth its weight in gold as well. So.
Well, you can imagine, can't you? You want to buy tickets for the press conference.
Exactly. Well, listen, if that is in Japan, I'm going to it anyway.
Yeah, well.
Obviously, we know your shows for July. Obviously, hopefully, potentially for September as well. You've obviously worked out the rest of the year yet. And
We got some good things lined up, and obviously a lot of them depend on results in the next 3 months. But once we get those, I mean, you know, we'll be announcing those. We've got a big show we're going to do in October. We've got two big shows, one in November and one in December. So we've got some good stuff lined up, some good fights lined up.
how many years have you been promoted?
The first show I did was in the 70s. Was Lenny McLean against Roy Shaw. It wasn't British Boxing Board Control. That was the first show I did back then.
Wow.
When I was only about 23, 24. That was the first one. So what's that? I've been promoted now for 20 years.
20 years. Well, how old was I? Let me have a look. I was 14.
No, I've been right nearly probably 40 years now. Frightening.
I wasn't even born. But where do you compare where you are now, Frank, and the state of, like I said, what you're doing now, the fights you're putting on now, the fighters you have in your stable, compared to that of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, etc.?
I think it's a different, you know, I'm in a different place now. Queensberry Promotions and Boxnation has now merged. It's one company. So it's a one-stop shop now. That's merged. And where are we? Where I am is I'm in a totally different environment. That we're actually running a TV channel as well as promoting. And it's been a bit of a culture shock for me over the last few years in readjusting what I do and how I do it. And as a result of that, people see us in a different way. Think that, you know, hang on a minute, he's not done this. He's not doing as much as that. But that's not the case. We've built a business. We've built a very significant business, and it's going from strength to strength. You know, it's a funny thing. I was looking at some of the ratings for some of the fights that have been on Sky, and we're outstripping them. The amount of people who are watching our shows. You know, and we're bringing the best, as I say, from around the world. So we've just sort of, meaning, you know, me and, you know, the team, we've refocused in what we're doing, and our business is to bring the best boxing to the British fans. And we do that from bringing fights in from around the world, buying fights from around the world, top fights, quality fights, bringing the best names in the sport, giving it their airing, and simultaneously developing young fighters and bringing them through. And we've been quite good in doing that, and it's sort of, you know, I suppose the proof of the pudding is looking at, you know, where we eventually got Tyson Fury with Derek Chisora, with the winner of that now getting a shot at Klitschko. Putting two undefeated fighters together in Billy Joe Saunders and Chris Eubanks Jr. Now, Billy Joe Saunders going on and fighting Andy Lee for the world title. So all that's been investment. That's all been investment from the channel, and that's been the direction we've been moving in. We're in quite a significant, an important stage of our involvement. You know, TV has changed dramatically. You know, you asked me how long I've been doing fights. It's changed dramatically. TV audiences are going down. People, especially, you know, youngsters in your generation and younger generation, how they consume the product is totally different than it's been in the last 40 years. They now can watch it on their telephones, on their app, their iPads, their computers. All this is a different way, and that's where people are, that's what is happening, and that's what we are now shifting our emphasis on, how we broadcast and how we deliver our fights and other fights to the fans, and that's really our next challenge. And we've got some, you know, seriously good people come on board. We've got Gareth Jones, who's joined the board. He was the former commercial director of Orange. He floated Orange twice. for billions. I mean, seriously, billions. He was the CEO of 3 and launched 3 in the UK. He's now on board and he's helping us to develop that side of the business. And he's made an important contribution to it. Over the last week, as I said, we merged the businesses. I'm chairman of the business. Gareth's the vice chairman. George is now the CEO of the overall. George was the CEO overall, in charge of both businesses. Jim McMahon is the managing director, and is responsible for the TV side of it. So we've got a very, very good, strong team there. You know, with Bill Ives involved, who's a significant investor into the business, as you know, my family are. Great financial director on board in Alison Chapman. All of those people now have made us. It's quite a strong board, and we've got vision and we've got focus in where we're taking this business, and we're taking this business to the next level, both in what we're going to give the fans, which is the best in boxing, and also how they can watch, how they consume what we're putting together. So it's a real change of the environment for us. And in the meantime, obviously, we're still signing fighters and we're still bringing fighters through and we're still developing fighters. There is a range of young fighters at the moment. I'm not going to start throwing names out there, but you know we've got some good kids on the books who I think have become very significant in what we're doing, and they're going to play a big part and in taking what we're doing forward, and they will benefit from that, because I think that is the way it's going to be. You know, at the moment, Sky TV, if you want to look at Sky TV, they've plateaued out. They've got an amount of subscribers who subscribe for Sky. They say, you know, apparently it's 10 million, but 10 million people don't watch boxing. Their average audience is probably 75,000 who watch boxing, according to the numbers that are out there. And obviously, you know, the bigger fights, like Anthony Joshua fights, it's the 150s, the 170s when he fights, and there are other couple of fighters also deliver ratings like Kell Brooks and so forth. But the average show there delivers between 50 to 70,000 eyeballs, according to their numbers. We're in a position where you look at that and you look at where do they go. You know, Sky now have changed the emphasis of their business. They're now trying to buy a telephone company. They're into the broadband market. They're doing the reverse of what BT are doing. You know, BT were in the telecommunications business, broadband. They've got into the TV. They've taken a significant amount of football away from Sky. Sky now have ploughed millions upon millions, or billions it is, into football, because that's their business. Without football, would there be a Sky TV? I doubt it, in the form it's at, because that is the nucleus of their business. That's what it's all about. The money they put into football means it's being taken away from other sports, and that's why they're going to do 8 pay-per-views this season. Apparently every week they're going to do pay-per-views. So the whole emphasis is changing. The whole situation with, you know, short term that's happening. Long term, it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes, because they're not going to get any more subscribers, and the fact that you think Sky are going to buy, or they're looking to buy a telephone company, is probably because they see the same thing. People will watch these things on their phones or in different ways, and I'm sure they're more aware than I am of that's how it's changing. So the whole TV market, I think, will dramatically change. Certainly in the next 5 years, I think it's going to be dramatic change. And what will happen if, for example, the next Premier League, if Sky do not get the Premier League, where will it leave it? You know, the whole world's changed. You look at, for example, the music. People listening to music. People would go and buy a CD. Now iTunes have gone in, changed the whole music industry. Got a billion subscribers. That's how most people consume their music.
8-track in your day?
No, I've got it's terrible when I've got this old, the 45 player with the arm on it in the car. But when I'm going over a bumpy road, it's a bit iffy. No, but how people consume their music is different. How people watch movies now. Netflix was a business that was nothing. Suddenly Netflix is the biggest business out there. You know, Netflix. I want to watch something. I watch it on Netflix. How many people watch Sky movies anymore? The truth. It's changed. The whole emphasis of the world's changed. How people watch things. And the one thing about boxing is that we own, not just me, but other people have content. Content, as they say, is king. We own it. we own our content. We put our content out there, whereas, you know, Sky buy content. Boxnation owns its content. So it's all, you know, this whole thing's going to change dramatically in the next few years. You know, you see, you know, especially if you should do an interview with Gareth
Jones.
George. You should do it while you're here with George.
I'm doing one with George in a minute.
You should do it and talk to them about it, because they got more idea than this old fogey. But the whole thing's changed. So it's about evolving, and everything evolved. You know, from putting the shows on when they weren't on TV years ago. They'd be on, you know, Mickey Duff days, Cartel days. They wouldn't show the fights live. They were shown 24 hours later. On it was sports night on a Wednesday. So the fights would be at the Albert Hall, Wembley, on a Tuesday. Then it watch it. I started doing live shows. The border control tried to stop me doing live shows back then. It killed the sport. People watching it live will kill the sport. You want to watch international fights, you go to the cinema. And you'd watch it in the cinema like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Then pay-per-view happened with Sky and so forth. So all those things happen. Everything keeps evolving and changing, and that's how it's going to continue to do so. And so you're asking me, you know, where we're sitting now. We're sitting in a place where we're not even focusing on you know, TV will change dramatically and will end. It will dramatically change how people do not watch or consume product, whether it be films, music, sport, as they used to. It will change. As the music business changes, as the film business has changed, the same thing will happen. And I'm going to tell you that, and I'm convinced that Rupert Murdoch will sell Sky, because it's too reliant on one product, which is the Premier League.
If they were to lose the Premier League?
If they were to lose what happens if the clubs turn around and say we're going to do our own thing? They get more money now, the clubs, from overseas sales than they do from domestic. Pay all this money. I mean, you know, we pay a fortune as fans for all this thing. They make a fortune. But that's what's happening.
Champions League's already gone. So.
Yeah.
Obviously, Boxnation been going over 3 years now. And
4 years in September.
4 years in September. And I suppose when you first started it, a lot of people, well, I'm not saying a lot of people, some people may have thought that
people. There was how many believers were there?
Well, I thought you would have folded by now.
Well, we nearly did, because the investors didn't put their money in. I mean, we had a real tough time. I mean, it really was tough. You know, he was robbing Peter to pay Paul, trying to keep things going. It was terrible. It was an awful situation. But you know what? We dug in, got our head down, and worked hard, and got to where we got to. And it was tough. It was dreadful. But what isn't? And in a crappy economic climate at the time. But you know, we're past that now. We're now moving on to the next phase. And you know, and as I say, we got a really good management structure now, and I think that's really important to where we're going with it.
So one word answer: will Boxnation be here in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I think it will be. That's 3 words. Yeah, I think it will be. 6 words, sorry.
Just say yes.
Yeah, yes. It was easier, wasn't it?
I hope so, because we've got a show on your
well,
station.
that's going to develop again, isn't it? You know, let's think about this, and I mean this with a great respect. Could you imagine, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, anyone putting your show on air? They wouldn't do it. They would not do it.
Well,
no.
a year ago.
No, but you understand. But that's the point I'm making. They wouldn't do
Yeah.
it. It's a difference. You know, the world's changing dramatically, and things like that. You know, your show wouldn't get. I don't mean that being patronising. I just mean it wouldn't.
No.
You know, it just would not happen. And the whole situation changed. One thing I do want to mention before we go, Adrian Broner. I've banged on for years that he's not the goods. You know, he never was the goods. And I sit here now.
You said that to me before.
Yeah, lots of time. And I sit here now and think, Ricky Burns, why did you not take that fight when he was offered that fight, when he was coming up in weight and he was going to get 400 grand, I think it was, to fight him? Why didn't you take that fight then? Because you'd have beaten him.
Still now you think he's definitely overhyped?
Who, Broner? Yeah. I think it's too easy to hit. He never done it for me. And listen, and Ricky Burns, there was a point in Ricky Burns' career where he was strong, he was mentally there, the whole thing was there. He had a problem, that idiot, joint manager I was with, Alex Morrison, I have a bad feeling. That was why we didn't take the fight, because he said he had a bad feeling. I don't know what that was. Maybe he had the runs or something, but it's annoying sometimes. You look at these things and saying there is, boxing and a lot of things you do in life about timing. That would have taken Ricky Burns into another level. And even if Ricky Burns had got beat, it wouldn't have been the end of the world, because not a big puncher, is he, the fella? Such a shame.
Onwards and upwards. Anyway, Frank, thank you very much for your time today. Can I take something from your desk?
Yeah, I've got an old hanky here that I'll just put my nose on.
I just want to take something. I just want to say.
Take these bills.
Some of them look like contracts.
Yeah,
I don't want to be seeing. I don't want to be
the
seeing that. With regards to Liam Smith, what's the situation with him? There was some sort of talk on Twitter, not recently, but a few weeks ago, that there was a potential fight there with Demetrius Andrade or Bundridge. Was there any truth in that, Frank?
Bundridge we couldn't do. Andrade we had done. We had the fight done, but I think Joe Gallagher put the kibosh on that. And it's a great shame, because I think it's a very winnable fight. Liam Smith can fight. He can fight, and it was a winnable fight, but at the end of the day, it weren't to be. So we'll, we've got to look at finding another route for him to win, to get himself in a position to fight for a world title. But I wish he had taken it.
Is there a possibility that we could still see Liam Smith and Liam Williams?
Well, Liam's had an operation on his hand. He had a hand injury, so they're waiting. Gary Lockett's has told me that he's just waiting for to settle down, see what the outcome of that. But that'd be a great fight, wouldn't it? I don't think it'd happen this year, but maybe next year. It's a good fight.
All right. Have you got any other news before we wrap this up, Frank?
No, that's about it. So I'll leave
No?
it. Yeah, that's all it, mate. But what do I know?
You look like you're making loads of deals here, Frank.
I'm trying to.
Yeah?
Trying to.
Anything we don't know about?
There's a lot of things you don't know.
I'd rather not know. Knowledge is not always
Knowledge-
power.
Well,
It's not
that's
always
true.
power.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I know. Sometimes you think to yourself, Jesus, no.
Sometimes.
No. Okay, yeah, we're working on a few things, so hopefully, fingers crossed, they'll come off.
Let's hope so. All right, Frank Warren, listen, thank you very much to
Thank you, young man.
IFL TV, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon. I hope people haven't been bored to death. This has probably been about, I'm going to guess about 40 minutes, but people watch these.
Well, they must.
The longer it is...
As the actress said to the vicar.
Yeah. The longer it is, for some reason, the more people watch it. That's our YouTube knowledge, what we know about. The longer something is, the more people watch it.
Well, that's good. It's. I just hope they know. Who's going to sponsor this? Horlicks.
No, we'll stick with our own sponsors, Macklin's Gym.
Okay, lovely.
All right, well, thank you very much for talking to us, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Pleasure as always.
KUGAN, CASSIUS, Frank Warren, IFL TV, thank you very much.